Hello there, I'm Scotty. You're not welcome to Stephen King's Saturday Night. This cage is up there, and I'll usually put Pennywise, but who cares? We are talking about The Dark Hat from 1993, starring Timothy Hutton and Michael Rooker, and directed by George Romero. I did not know this was a Romero film until I popped up on the screen. I'm like, oh, no shit. Okay. Tells the story of Thad Beaumont, who was a writer, and early at some point in his career he created a second, like another nom de plume, so to speak, called can't remember names. He created another nom de plume, and this he gets called out by this guy who's trying to blackmail him, and then he decides he's going to one up this guy, and he's going to basically out his nom de plume and say it was him the entire time, and they have a whole little burial thing from it. But then people associated with this start to die. His agent's ex-wife, people he knew, the person, the photographer, the person burying it, the whole thing. People are dying. And all the evidence is leading back to Thad. And so, like, the mystery is what is going on. So, you get the first scene of this movie here. First scene of this movie, you see this kid who, in 1968, which I gotta think that wasn't in the book, and that was just a Romero thing, because 1968, Night of the Living Dead, so he's hearing birds in his head, and they say it was like a tumor, and then it's got an eyeball. So I'm like, wait a minute, is this like Malignant, where it's like because they say it's almost like a physical presence, and then they find later he was born with a twin in the womb, and they cut it out. I'm like, okay. And so I'm guessing from what I heard that in the book it is just an alternate personality sort of thing, but in here it goes too far to the point where it can't be just an alternate personality, because like he's getting phone calls, and then I know they hint, it's just a recording, but they say it's from a payphone type thing. And there are times where we see where he is, where Thad is, and then where the other guy is, couldn't have happened. And they even one of the killers says, "I know you were here. It couldn't have been you, but it's you," and the whole thing. Now, Michael Rooker plays a character named Alan Pangborn, and that name, when I heard it, I'm like, that name sounds familiar to me. How would I know it? Apparently, it's a King regular in his books. It was in Needful Things, which came out the same year, but Scott Glenn played that same character in the Castle Rock TV series, which I've seen the first season, and that character's in that season. So that's why I remember it. I'm like, how do I know? And then I was watching the video from Joe Blow Horror, and they mentioned Alan Pangborn. They were showing all the different versions, Rooker's version and Harris's version, and then Scott Glenn. And I went, wait, was that the one from Castle Rock? And so I looked it up. Yes, it was in Castle Rock. And this takes place in Castle Rock, Maine, because it's a Stephen King story. So we gotta take place in Maine, right? And so Timothy Hutton plays Thad Beaumont, and his alter ego of, is it Chuck something? I don't know. His alter ego. And, they do a good job of, it's Hutton because of his voice, but in the build-up, they don't really show the murders. They don't really show his face. You hear the voice, the laid-back drawl, and you don't know exactly what's going on, but you can tell it's Hutton's voice. But is it going to be Hutton physically? Is it something, else? And when they finally reveal it, and he looks different, Also, I think there's one scene that could demonstrate that it's two people. Is when the doctor is killed. He goes to see this doctor in Bangor, Maine, and it's the doctor that helped cut the thing out of him as a kid. And as he's talking to him, he gets stabbed. But I wonder if this was shot as if it was taken from the book, because that doesn't react to this. He doesn't realize that the doctor is dead until later. It seems, the doctor's in the middle of talking to him and he gets stabbed. And there's no, I don't know. And I thought there was going to be some kind of a twist where it's revealed that Thad was the evil version, and that not evil, but Thad was the parasite, and the real person whose body belongs to is this Chuck guy. And Thad was the nom de plume, and Chuck was the real name. But they don't go that route. It would have been interesting, though. I don't know, because there's a scene where he's got the hand and he's writing, and then, and they're kind of going back and forth. It's like, I want it back. And this is another one where it doesn't really make sense, where it's like, it seems like it's the same, two entities in the same body. But then there's very much two entities, and like you could say, oh, he's just seeing himself. But like Pangborn and the wife see him too. At one point he takes one of the kids, so I don't know, it's very confusing. Like, they don't exactly spell it out either. Is it two different entities, or is this whole battle inside his head? Because they got these birds, and it's also confusing because earlier on, so when he's on the phone to them, he's like, "Oh yeah, the sparrows are coming." He's like, "What sparrows? What are you talking about?" Chuck, whatever his name is. But earlier in the film, he wrote, "The sparrows are coming." So I don't know. Sparrows are coming. Or the sparrows flying in, or something. And I'm just like, wait, if he wrote that, or maybe he wrote that as a warning subconsciously. Maybe it was Thad that wrote it subconsciously as a warning for himself. I don't know. It's very confusing. I did enjoy the movie. There's some interesting choices Romero goes for. There's a scene in an apartment building where the power is out, and so the lighting is basically from like a sign outside that goes between blue and red, and that's pretty cool. With that, not that, but the alter ego guy kills someone there, and Timothy Hutton is great. I heard Romero had a lot of problems with Hutton on the set because he was a method actor, and so when he was playing the villain, he only wanted to be called by the villain's name, and he was acting like, I don't even think it was Chuck now. I don't remember what it was, but yeah, it was something. It was interesting, I guess, but I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. But yeah, just some of the shots, like he has a hallucination. There's like a turkey in an oven, but like the oven practically breaks open, and he sees inside he's just turkey just open. I think it signifies the whole like the head thing. And now I know that James Wan didn't rip this off because it goes in a different direction, and because it was his wife Ingrid who gave me the idea. Excuse me. Anyway, but at first I was like, so is this where they got Malignant from? But I remember hearing that it was sort of an original idea, or maybe just something he came up with, didn't realize. But this is not fully like Malignant, as it doesn't completely go that way, I guess. Although I haven't read the book, so I don't know if the book goes that way and they just decided to go a different direction here. I don't know. But and I complained about this before. This is one of those movies where we had the climax and it just ends. There's no wraparound. There's no, whole thing. And they did set something up because he's talking to Reggie, his librarian lady, and she's like, "Well, I'll know it was you when you put a red carnation or something in the vase." And then I'm like, oh, so that's gonna be a thing. I'm like, oh, are they gonna do a thing where we don't know which one survived? And she finds the red flower. No, we don't do that. It's very much we know who survived. We know that it was Thad and not the other guy. One little nitpick is that I get why they do it, but for some reason, as it goes on, the bad guy, the alter ego, he starts to deteriorate and he starts to look like he's stabbed in the hands. He's got the hole in the hand too, which could also signify it's the same body, but I don't know. And then he's got like a gash here, and he's got like face falling apart because he's starting to deteriorate. He needs to write another story to survive. And again, I think it would play more if in the novel, I think he was an alternate ego where it was more metaphoric, like you were trying to get rid of me and I'm dying. And so they had that one final showdown, and they do. And then Thad wins, of course, and the birds come in. I don't know how they're supposed to explain that to the cops, so that's going to be interesting. But, I mean, I know Pangborn was there, but, yeah. One note that I did call is the guy who blackmailed him. He does that, and then he's talking to his kid, his baby, and he's like, well, I'm going to cut off his penis. I'm going to cut off his pecker, and I'm going to shove it down his throat. So they know that he was a blabber. And so when he mentions the guy, oh, this guy, he was after me. And I'm like, because at first, again, calling back to something else from King was, wait a minute, this guy is coming, calling him out. I'm like, is this like a Mort Rainey situation? Is this Secret Window? Is this the alter ego guy? No, because when he tells him, oh, this guy was blackmailing me, and these cops show up and find him, they find him, he's been castrated, his peckers and his down his throat, and yeah, it's exactly what he said he was going to do to him. And then he mentioned, well, I said it's what my character in my book would do to him. Like, so is this the author, or is this a book character? Well, the author wrote the character, so I guess it works, but, yeah, I'm going to give it a middle of the road, but a very high middle of the road. I just feel like people say this is underrated, and I liked it for what it was, but it's not one I'm going to run back to, a movie that caught my eye where I'm like, I have to buy that right away, although I did give The Curve a middle of the road. Spoiler alert. I don't know, by now it should be out. Well, if you haven't seen my review for The Curve, watch that. I'm sorry. But I gave it a middle of the road, and I bought that, because I was just intrigued by the movie. But I wasn't too intrigued by this. It's fine. There's a Scream Factory Blu-ray. I don't know if that's out of print now, and it costs $1 billion. Who knows? But, yeah. So what are your thoughts on The Dark Half? Let me know in the comments below. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching. I've been Scotty, and I'll see you in the next one.